It's been a decade since David Fincher's adaptation of Gone Girl hit our screens and sent waves through society. Amy Dunne was villainous, vengeful, and also kind of relatable.
You think I'd let him destroy me and end up happier than ever? No way. He doesn't get to win.
And while the story was grounded in its era, it's in many ways even more relevant today. So let's take a look back at the film, how its commentary on splits of the self, existing in the public eye, and the problem with the media all fit into our current world, and why Amy's wrath still connects with audiences. The film was impactful in many ways, but the one thing that many viewers really latched onto was the breaking down of the cool girl, a trope that was so incredibly pervasive at the time.
Cool girl is hot. Cool girl is gay. Cool girl is fun.
We've even got a whole video breaking down the trope in the many ways it popped up on our screens and in real life.
Men always use that, don't they? As their defining compliment. She's a cool girl.
As Amy explains, the cool girl isn't a real person, but a facade a woman feels the need to put up in order to be accepted by a man, pretending to like whatever he likes regardless of how she actually feels about it, coming across as totally nonchalant and easygoing, while also making sure to always be put together and ready for anything, focusing her entire life around his wants and needs, but making sure that he thinks she's just oh so happy to do so. The cool girl persona was running rampant during the era in which Gone Girl was released. Movie characters going on and on about how they like sports and cars, not any of that icky girly stuff. Real life celebs making sure that we knew that they loved beer and carbs. But oh, don't worry, they'll still remain rail thin without even having to work out. It was a very trying time. But what Amy's monologue gets at is that this wasn't born out of some deep desire to be a cool girl, but because so much of society's messaging was that behaving in that way was the only way a woman could be accepted.
When I met Nick Dunne, I knew he wanted cool girl. And for him, I'll admit, I was willing to try.
If she showed that she cared about anything too much, she was branded uptight. If she didn't like crass jokes, she was a prude. If she actually liked sports, she was lying. If she ate healthfully and exercised, she was too self-centered. But if she ate like a cool girl claimed to and didn't remain thin, she was a slob. And so this all led to many women like Amy working to really excel at the cool girl game, to so thoroughly adopt the cool girl ways that even she could sometimes forget that it wasn't really her. But of course, cracks always start to show.
I lived in the moment. I was f***ing game. But Nick got lazy. He became someone I did not agree to marry.
While the cool girl phenomenon of that era has died out, we can see its echoes today. Social media is filled with people attempting to put forth an idea of who they think will be the most appealing, hiding their true selves behind a false self that is more marketable. Though this time, not to just one specific guy or group, but to everyone. The line of caring enough without seeming like you care too much is still razor thin, and this leads to a lot of pressure to never slip up. But as Amy found, no matter how well you play the game, it's set up to make sure that you never really win. When the film released, social media wasn't quite yet the totally all-encompassing behemoth that it's now become. Facebook and Instagram were still mostly for sharing stuff with people you actually knew. Influencers were certainly starting to make their way into the mainstream, but it was still often a surprise to see them hit the big time. And the first official version of Musical.ly launched only 2 months before the film premiered, and it would be 4 more years before it was bought out and turned into TikTok. But the idea of the split between one's public and private selves goes back millennia, and even by 2014, the idea of having a version of you for public consumption was something that even everyday, non-influencer people were beginning to consider. Amy's story hit on that feeling in a way that continues to feel relevant, both with the way she worked the media to her advantage, and with the way she was thrust into the spotlight at an early age by her parents, who wrote a book series based on her.
Your parents literally plagiarized your childhood.
No, they improved upon it and then peddled it to the masses.
Or rather, based on the version of her that they wish she was.
When I was 10, I quit cello. In the next book, Amazing Amy became a prodigy.
They created this idealized version of who Amy should be, a version of her that was perfect and beloved, and one that she could never really live up to in real life. There was an entire audience of people who loved this false version of her, and she learned from an early age that to succeed, she couldn't fight back against it, but instead had to do everything she could to compete.
Regular, flawed, real Amy. Jealous, as always, of the golden child. Perfect, brilliant, amazing Amy.
She, unsurprisingly, came to resent both her parents and Amazing Amy because of the trap this put her in. But it also all worked to shape her ideas around how one must play into whatever unreal version of yourself other people want to see from you if you want to get your way.
Start with the fairy tale early days. Those are true, and they're crucial. You want Nick and Amy to be likable. After that, you invent.
She carried this false self into adulthood, molding it into the cool girl persona she's perfected by the point we meet her.
Nick loved a girl I was pretending to be.
And the specter of the spotlight followed her, continuing to shape her behavior and view of herself. And this is why so much of her revenge plot focused on making sure Nick was skewered in the media. It wasn't just enough to have him be regretful in his own life. She wanted to make sure that he felt the full weight of that public perception, of the burning eye of the media and the world looking down on and judging him. We see this kind of thing play out in smaller ways on social media now, as people call out those they feel have wronged them in the hopes that dragging their issues into the light will allow them to feel vindicated in the public arena.
You don't know if she has friends, you don't know what she does all day, and you don't know your wife's blood type.
Sure, y'all are married.
In Amy, we can also see how living in the spotlight can lead to a feeling of superiority. As far as Amy is concerned, she is the smartest and hardest working person in any room she's in. She justifiably looks down on Nick for being lazy and not putting any effort into their relationship, or seemingly anything else. But we also see this in the way she only sees everyone around her as tools to be used for her own personal gain. She constantly derides Noelle while pretending to be her friend, just so she can use her as part of her scheme.
You befriend a local idiot, harvest the details of her humdrum life, and cram her with stories about your husband's violent temper.
She feels that she's entirely above the couple she meets at the motel, and soon learns that smarts can't save you from everything. And she works her way back into her stalker ex-boyfriend Desi's life because she knows she can use his obsession for her own ends. In the same way that she's had to detach herself from the idea of her true self to more securely hold on to the false persona that keeps her afloat, she's also lost the ability to connect with other people in any real, meaningful way. Amy's rage, at its core, stems from feeling trapped. Figuratively in her cool girl and Amazing Amy personas, literally in the suburbs after being forced to leave Manhattan and move to Missouri. She feels like she's done everything she's supposed to, and yet things continue to not work out the way she wants. This is the most clear in her relationship with Nick.
We were happy pretending to be other people.
She became the person he wanted and needed her to be. She's been funding their entire life with her trust fund since they lost their jobs, and she takes care of essentially everything else in their lives. And he just exists and cheats on her. And if anything, resents her for all that she does because he feels emasculated.
Nick Dunne took my pride and my dignity and my hope and my money. He took and took from me until I no longer existed.
Amy has had to keep a tight lid on her true feelings because being upset isn't cool. And this is another reason her revenge is so based on being loud and public. She wants to finally be able to feel like she's screaming the truth to the world that she's had to keep quiet for so long. And it's telling that her plot is not to do the obvious thing, or, well, the obvious thing for a murder mystery at least, and kill Nick, but instead to erase herself. She's had a lifetime of practice doing that, and so feels more secure with knowing that while she's gone, the persona she worked so hard to craft will remain.
I am so much happier now that I'm dead. Technically missing. Soon to be presumed dead. Gone.
Her initial plan is to end her own life after she's made her getaway.
And after all the outrage, when I'm ready, I'll go out on the water with a handful of pills and a pocket full of stones.
But she soon comes to realize, in the same way she can't outrun her problems, she also can't outrun that true self lurking within her, the true self that wants control more than anything. She decides instead to return to Nick and her old life, but this time with her rage even more finely tuned and sharpened into something that will allow her to wield control in a new way. No longer the cool girl, the real, devious, terrifying Amy is out in the open, at least within their relationship.
The only time you liked yourself was when you were trying to be someone this cunt might like. I've killed for you. Who else can say that? You think you'd be happy with a nice Midwestern girl? No way, baby. I'm it.
She's flipped the script so that now her anger, rather than something to be hidden by her and ignored by Nick, is the central driving force of their relationship and her life. The film also works to critique the media apparatus and how it blows up stories, digs into people's lives, but is also most interested in whatever will sell, instead of what is true.
You implied that I had carnal relations with my sister.
I didn't use the I word. I said you two were extremely close.
This still sounds pretty familiar, as social media has allowed for the same, but on a much larger scale and faster pace. And the other themes at the heart of the film also still feel relevant today because, as much as we'd like to think we've made big strides forward, things haven't actually changed all that much. If anything, after a bit of forward momentum, it's felt like we've taken a few steps back in recent years. And so that simmering anger and that desire to enact revenge on a world that boxes us in and makes us miserable is still there. Drew Gregory wrote in her piece on the film for Bright Wall Dark Room, "It's true that Amy is psychotic, but her actions feel rational and satisfying, not to mention downright impressive, set against the backdrop of patriarchy. Can someone really be psychotic in a psychotic world?"
Said she was complicated.
Nick! Everyone knows complicated is code for bitch.
Amy Dunne was never meant to be someone likable or who people were supposed to emulate. Like other anti-heroes, she's a vector for a larger idea and commentary. And this is one thing that actually made the film so interesting. It just let her be evil and calculating, without couching it in some, "oh, but in a soft way, she totally feels bad about it deep down because she's a lady" wishy-washiness.
I'm not a quitter.
This is what allowed the film to have such a clear-eyed, focused view of the struggles and pressures that molded Amy into the monster she became, and what made her story so relatable to so much of the female audience.
All we did was resent each other and try to control each other and cause each other pain.
That's marriage. Now I'm getting ready.
She's a reflection of the dark truth that many want to ignore, and sometimes it takes someone bad to drag that kind of darkness out into the light.
What have we done to each other? What will we do?
That's The Take. Click here to watch the video we think you'll love, or here to check out a whole playlist of awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.